What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we're going to be talking about the first person convicted of murder in what is now the United States of America, and also the first person to be hanged in New England, and that man is John Billington. John Billington was born in Lincolnshire sometime in 1580. He traveled to the New World on the Mayflower, and actually he was one of the 41 male signatures that signed the Mayflower Compact. If you're not aware, the Mayflower Compact is a set of rules for self-governance that was established by the travelers to the New World who were on the Mayflower. It was basically a majority rules kind of thing, and it was kind of put there and written out to stave off mutiny. If you guys want a history series where I just talk about things like that, like the Mayflower Compact, let me know. I am really into history, and I'll literally research anything that takes place like before 1920. Okay, back to John Billington. There's not much that's known about John's life before he set sail to the New World. His life in England is kind of like, mostly from what I can see, speculation, so I didn't really put anything in it. I know that he was kind of a con man, half a thief, if you will. John and his wife Eleanor, their two sons John Jr. and Francis, set sail on September 6, 1620 on the Mayflower's third and final voyage to the New World. They had to turn back twice because of problems with another ship. It was kind of like a fleet. So those four were on the Mayflower. The ship was only 100 feet long. It carried about 102 passengers and 30 to 40 crew members, and this caused really cramped conditions. Within 2 months of setting out, the caulking that was meant to keep the water from coming into the ship was breaking off and falling into the ocean. So a lot of people that were on that ship just laid there soaking wet on the ground, extremely sick, and there was nothing anybody can do about it. And conditions were already cramped with people standing up, so now they have all these sick people laying there. It really doesn't have much to do with the story, but it was a really rough voyage. The conditions of water filling the ship, the extremely cramped conditions, the improper rationing of food, like everybody wasn't getting the same amount. Mainly the women were not getting their fair share, and desperately unsanitary conditions caused a lot of people to either get sick or die before they even reached Plymouth, Massachusetts. Their destination was Virginia, but again, that has nothing to do with the story. If you want a history series, I'll let you guys know. So they reached Plymouth, Massachusetts, and a lot of them were really sick just to begin with. This was really nothing, though, compared to how many people died during that winter. They landed there in November, and New England has some really harsh winters still to this day. And I guess without global warming, back then it had to be crazy. Plus, obviously, they don't have everything that we have. They were just getting to this new world. A lot of them died because of the winter, how harsh and cold it was. On November 21st, 1620, the Mayflower docked at the Cape Cod Hook, which is now known as Provincetown Harbor, and the Mayflower Compact was signed that very day. Now let's talk about the Billingtons. The Billington family, all four of them, very quickly became known as troublemakers in the colony, and their name appears time and again in documentation of, troubles and trials that were going on for smaller things. The Billington Sea, as we now know it, was discovered by John's son, Francis, when he decided one day he just wanted to go off exploring on his own. He was looking to discover his own sea, to name it after himself, but he actually found a little, kind of lake area, which is still, as I said, the Billington Sea. Now, aboard the Mayflower, there was a radical group of separatists called the Brownists, and this group felt that the English rule was corrupt and they wanted to establish new government. Obviously, that's why they went to the New World. And this Brownist separatist group was led by a man named William Bradford. John and his family were not a part of this group. They were four of the very few people who did not come as a part of this separatist group who thought the Church of England was corrupt. John believed he was still loyal to the Church of England. He actually came to the New World because he was escaping several creditors. He was in a lot of debt. I told you he was kind of like a shady kind of guy. He would have got along with last week's Mary Bateman very good. He was a shyster and a swindler, and he didn't want to pay his bills. And again, there's a lot more to that story on how he was able to travel to the New World. So he wasn't a part of this group led by William Bradford, and this group took up the majority of people on the ship. Most of them were these Brownist separatist people. John came to be known as a miscreant, a troublemaker, and an all-around bad guy, actually, before the ship even set sail. He just wasn't getting along with people. He was irritating people. He would give these, speeches that would rile people up because he was still loyal to the Church of England, and he didn't agree with these Brownist separatists who were so desperate to get out of the jurisdiction of the Church of England. So right from the door, nobody liked him and nobody liked his family. Also, while they were still aboard the ship, his son Francis gained his own unscrupulous reputation when he decided to fire his father's gun while aboard the ship right next to a powder keg in an overly cramped room. Luckily, nothing came of that, but obviously people were pissed. They did not like this family. So imagine you're a family of four settling with over 100 people and they all can't stand you. That doesn't sound good, especially when there's basically no law established yet. So keep in mind the ship was already filling with water at this point, but luckily nobody died, nobody got blown to bits because of this, and someone actually beat the crap out of Francis, and then it was a done issue. Now keep in mind about half the population of the settlers actually died during this really harsh winter. So this brought the population of the colony down to around 50 settlers in all. Okay, so that's what was left. Once the winter was over and spring came, those that were lucky enough to be alive all kind of went off to try to discover their own parcels of land or discover things on their own. They wanted to explore this new world that they were settling in. This is when Francis discovered the sea, and while he was off doing that, his brother John Jr. got lost in the woods and ended up needing a search party. They looked for him for several days until finally he found his own way out. In March of 1621, John Billington Sr. was convicted of contempt because he was called upon to perform some kind of military duty, and instead of doing it, he instead started making inflammatory remarks about and delivering hate speeches against the captain of the ship, Miles Standish. Apparently, this was against the law. This was against the rules of the compact. After he was found guilty, John Sr. was actually sentenced to have his heels tied to the back of his neck, but he groveled and apologized so profusely that he basically was given a slap on the wrist. They told him, don't do that again, otherwise we're not going to be so lenient on you, and he agreed not to do it again. They said it because it was only his first offense and he showed so much humility, he swore he learned his lesson, In April of 1621, Governor John Carver was working in a field one day and he collapsed due to the hot weather, probably a heart attack, and he died a couple of days later. So someone needed to take his place as governor. And keep in mind, this was 1621. The governor was the highest ranking person in the New World in 1621. There was no president or anything like that, The colonists obviously chose William Bradford, the guy who ran this Brown's separatist group, who were still the majority of the settlers, and obviously this meant some trouble for John Billington. William Bradford is known to have said, he did not like John's whole family because of their religious affiliation, their reputations as troublemakers, their unlawful behavior, and just their overall general attitude towards the other colonists. So the new governor, the highest authority in the land, does not like this man or his family. In 1622, 4 of the settlers' homes were destroyed in some kind of mysterious arson. And remember, back then, a man's reputation, a family's reputation was everything. And it was how people judged if they were going to like you, if they were going to include you. And everyone blamed it on John because they didn't like him. They blamed it on him and his family, but there was never any proof to, to prove that. And he never ended up getting in trouble for it. And history still doesn't know whether he did it or not. If I were to wager a guess, probably he did it, but it was never proven. He never got brought up on charges for it, even though most people in the colony, most colonists, had their suspicions. In 1624, two men, one named John Oldham and one named John Lyford, were banished from Plymouth Colony because they were writing inflammatory letters saying how much they hated the colony, how wrong the colony was. Like, they were against everything these Brownist separatists stood for. So they were banished because of it. In the history books, you'll see this written as the Oldham-Lyford scandal. These two men were considered, quote, a danger to the community in general, end quote. And that's the official reason why they were banished. Again, while no proof could be found, while answering for his crimes in front of the council, the people that judged if you were guilty or innocent back in that time, John Lyford accused John Billington as being an accomplice to himself and to John Oldham. There are a lot of Johns. I'm getting really confused. Once again, if Billington had something to do with all of this, he got away with it due to lack of evidence. And once again, if I were a betting woman, I would definitely bet that he did have something to do with it, because they got banished for basically the same thing that he did before, that they were going to tie his heels to his neck, except that they didn't say they were sorry and they were writing it down. That's why they were banished. Also, of course, when he was questioned, he denied having anything to do with it. And right after this happened, his wife Eleanor got into her own trouble and had to face the council. Eleanor was found guilty of slander and had to submit to a public whipping as punishment. And she did. She took her punishment. She didn't grovel and cry and whine. She put on her big girl pants and took that public whipping. John's anti-government agitation and speeches continued long after Lyford and Oldham were banished. I don't know why John and his family didn't get banished too. Like I said, the only difference that I can tell is that the other two, Oldham and Lyford, were writing it down. So I don't know. John continued with his agitation towards the government and trying to get rile people up, trying to create a mutiny. In 1626, the Plymouth colony settlers received full ownership of the land, and they divided it amongst themselves. They chose who was going to get what. Obviously, this is not boding well for John and his family either, because they were basically the most hated family in the entire colony. John Billington received a small house, 63 acres of land, and future land rights. I don't know what that means, but that actually was not a very good deal even for back then. 63 acres, they have this entire colony. There's not too many people left. They basically gave him what was left over. They threw him some breadcrumbs and were like, there you go. His loyalty to the Church of England, his repeated run-ins with the law, he was really bitter, but I'm pretty sure this is why they did that to him. The colonists considered him irredeemable and incorrigible, so he had a very big lack of social status, and from what I read, that's how they decided who would get what, who had the highest status. So the governor obviously got the most, and then it trickled down from there, with John and his family being the low men on the totem pole, so to speak. In 1630, John Billington and John Newcombe got into an argument over the rights to hunt on land. I guess their land was right next to each other's, and Newcombe or Billington, one of them wanted to hunt and the other one said, no, that's my land. That's the best way I can kind of explain it without getting into a huge narrative and a deep history. This isn't a deep dive. This is just one of my quick weekly historical cases. So John Newcombe, John Billington getting into an argument over land. I speculate it was some kind of property line dispute, but there's no real record of the cause. Anyways, right after the two were heard arguing, Newcombe was seen storming out of the colony. Like, he was leaving, he was storming away. And not too long, maybe just a few minutes after, John Billington was seen basically following him, like walking off very fast in the same direction as if he were trying to catch up with Newcombe. He didn't say he was. This is what people assumed. Later on that same day, Newcombe was found shot to death, and everybody just assumed that John Billington had done it. Newcombe was found shot to death later on that day, and everybody basically accused John Billington of being the perpetrator. According to Governor William Bradford, who, remember, is kind of like mortal enemies with John Billington, he said the argument earlier in the day about the hunting rights or the property line, whatever the argument was about, that was motive enough for them to accuse and possibly convict John Billington. And he also said that the weapon, the gun, could be traced right back to John Billington. I don't know how they did this. Again, I'd have to go into like a deep dive, like history, forensics. Did they have forensic back then? Did they like test the bullet? I don't know, but according to Governor William Bradford, that gun could be traced right back to that dirty scoundrel John Billington. So he was arrested and charged with murder. Soon after he was arrested and charged, John Billington was convicted of the willful murder of John Newcombe by a jury. John Billington Sr. was sentenced to hang, and he would be the first person ever to do so on American soil. The very first death sentence carried out in the good old United States of America. Now, there were some questions about this conviction, and one of them was, quote, "Did the local authorities who were governing Plymouth Colony possess criminal jurisdiction sufficient to impose capital punishment?" End quote. There was another governor, John Winthrop, who governed the neighboring Massachusetts Bay Colony, that William Bradford actually convinced that they did have jurisdiction, they were able to convict him, and they were able to sentence him to hang. So Bradford got Winthrop to basically be complicit in the carrying out of the first death sentence. I don't know, I just keep thinking, didn't most people back then have the same kind of weapons? I mean, what did he do? Leave the gun or the rifle or whatever laying right next to the guy that he killed? How do they know that that was his weapon? I couldn't even find how they knew when I researched this. I honestly think the fact that Billington and his family had such a bad reputation, he was such a rabble-rouser, if you allow me the use of that word, and he and his family had so many run-ins with the law, and he himself had so many run-ins with the governor, with Governor William Bradford, that I don't even know if it really mattered if they could prove it or not. Like Bradford said, the argument was motive enough, and I think the argument was enough for the jurors to also convict him. I think the colonists just wanted him out. The argument between the two earlier in the day was enough circumstantial evidence, I guess, for them to convict him, and I cannot stand circumstantial evidence, and maybe one day I'll do a long video on that. I can go on and on about it. I know you guys love hearing me rant. Just watch one of the hot mess recovery videos. Okay, so to finish up, researchers of the Society of the Mayflower Descendants still to this day question Bradford's recounting of the trial, like how he wrote it down to be preserved throughout history. They question whether or not it's accurate, whether or not he just got rid of Billington because he didn't like him and manipulated all the people around him into being complicit. And so was John Billington, in the end, the real first murderer on American soil, or was it actually William Bradford because he wanted this guy gone, so he manipulated everyone else to be complicit in the crime? Just thought of that now. That's not even in my script. Nah. So anyway, John Billington was hanged not far from Plymouth Rock, and his body was buried in an unknown location. Still to this day, nobody knows where the gravesite of John Billington is. So this is how John Billington ended up the first recorded murderer in what we now know as the United States, and also the first person to be executed from having a trial by jury as well. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please be sure to give me a thumbs up if you liked this video, if you like me, if you want to see more of Gemma Jade. Be sure to subscribe as well if you haven't already. I have so much content coming up. I have so much previous content. The podcast, I'm hoping, is going to be out by the end of this week, but I'm not making any promises. My higher quality kratom that I pray to God works is going to be here today, so you'll have a kratom update soon. And drop me a comment, guys. I know a lot of you like these history videos that I do, but a lot of you don't. And the way I know that a lot of you don't is they have the lowest views. The Glimmer Man has the highest views by far. I am going to start doing some more paranormal stuff. I have a couple half scripts that I'm working on to get some scare into you guys. But yeah, drop me a comment. You know, I love discussing. And if you guys want to help out me, and if you want to help out the channel, help me get some new and better equipment, new and better background, all that kind of stuff. I am doing this full-time, plus I'm a full-time stay-at-home mom. And I'm not monetized and I'm not getting paid for anything yet, not even the podcast. So if you're able to do so, and if you should feel so inclined, please click the link in the description box for my PayPal me and make a donation to the channel. It would really help me out, guys. Any little bit helps. Everything's appreciated. And if you can't, of course, I still love you. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. Most of you have been here with me from the very beginning. My subscriber count is slowly rising. I just love what I do. I love doing this. I feel like there's just not enough time in the day for me to do everything that I want to. All right, guys, have your best day, have your best night. Be kind to each other. It doesn't cost anything and can actually gain you so much. And I will see you sometime during the week with the next case. Bye-bye.